Hey everybody, my name is Hope Van Ravensway. I'm the Care and Outreach Pastor here at Southside Christian Church. I'd like to welcome you to our first video in a three-part series where we're going to be talking about learning about and listening to people who might be different than us. In this series specifically, we're going to be talking about racial injustice and racial reconciliation and our role as Christians. When we were thinking and planning for this series, I knew that the most important thing we needed to do was have everything we say be taken right from God's word. And so I spent some time kind of studying and reading up on it and kind of came to the conclusion, like I'm sure a lot of you have felt, I'm not a Bible scholar. I have a lot to learn from people who have gone to school to learn about theology and get trained in this. And luckily for us, we have many people around us who are trained and have learned and gone to school to learn about the Bible. And so I've invited Brooks and Brandon to come help us kind of view this subject from a biblical lens. Hey guys.
Hey.
Thanks for coming and talking about this. I know that there's no way in just a short amount of time that we can cover everything that the Bible says about this. But as we were thinking and planning for this, was there a story or an instance in the Bible that you thought might be the most applicable for us to hear?
Yeah, it's for sure. We've talked a lot about this when it comes to race in the Bible, racial reconciliation. There's a long history of racial injustice and pain and trouble, even among the Hebrew people. And so there's lots of places to kind of think about this stuff. But we kind of settled on a story that Jesus told in Luke 10 about the Good Samaritan that I think has some interesting things for us to think about when it comes to this topic.
Probably everybody knows it, but it's good to hear it again. And especially if you kind of think of the, sometimes we read these stories and we miss the important role that race plays in the story. And it's like a primary teaching tool that Jesus uses here. So it's in Luke chapter 10, verse 25. On one occasion, an expert in the law or a teacher in the law stood up to test Jesus. So he's testing Jesus specifically. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? It's a really good question. What is written in the law? Jesus replies. How do you read it? And the man answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. That should have ended the conversation, but in verse 29, but he wanted to justify himself, the man did. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor?
And that's a key point too there, because he's looking to make himself look good in front of people. And his question is essentially, what is my obligation?
That's right.
Who do I have the duty to love?
That's right.
Who must I love? And I know rabbis kind of worked through this question in their day. It wasn't new to Jesus.
Nope.
Some rabbis said only Torah observant Jews,
Right.
those are the ones you love, those are your neighbors. And other rabbis said, well, all Israelites, it's important to love them, even those who don't follow the law. And others said, well, any Israelite who, even the tax collectors and sinners, you should love them. But no rabbis were saying, love people outside of our Israelite.
Yeah. Now, if they
family.
did everything to be like us,
Maybe.
and followed all the rules, maybe we'll kind of let them in and kind of love them, but still not like one of us, right? I think it's important to note here, too, in the text that this man, we think, has been following Jesus already, because Jesus here combines two passages from the Old Testament, and we call this kind of Jesus's creed. Scott McKnight uses this language. We don't see any Old Testament scholar that combines these two ethics in any other place, to love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. So this seems to be somebody who's been in conversation with Jesus and now is testing him to prove himself more righteous than the other people. Mm-hmm. And Jesus does what Jesus is the best ever at doing. He says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. And a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So to a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, now Samaritan is half Jewish, half not. These are people that are real close to being on the inside but are not. And so they are almost hated more than Gentiles would have been by the Jewish people.
They had a different place they worshiped. They had a different kind of Torah, different law. There's long-seated hatred between Jewish people and people of Samaritan descent.
But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, which is about a day's wage or so, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 men do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law replies, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. It's a pretty good text for understanding just our role in racial reconciliation.
Well, and the thing I like about it is that Jesus strips away any labels for the man who is the victim in the story, right? He is just a man. We don't know, is he an Israelite? Is he observing the law? Is he living a righteous life? Is he a Gentile? Is he an outsider? We have no idea. This is just a person on the road.
That's right.
And he's not exactly a very smart man, because we know the road from Jerusalem to Jericho is often a place where people would get robbed or beaten. You didn't travel alone on that road. Everybody just sort of knew that. So you have this kind of weird situation going on with this man. But then you also see that the priest and the Levite also aren't brilliant either.
No.
Also traveling alone, as it were.
On the road.
Yep. So there's a sense, even as we have this discussion about race and image bearing and all that kind of stuff, that we are all alike in the image of God.
Yeah.
Just like in this story. But just like in this story, even though we've put some levels to the priest and the Levite and whoever this man was, we're all broken as well.
That's a discussion for today, because one of the narratives that's going on, I think, in Christian circles is that what we're practicing this isn't racism, this is cultural racism. It's not about the color of somebody's skin, it's that their culture is different and it's less holy, it's less worthy. Paul deals with exactly the same issue in Romans. And, he says, his final point there is all have fallen short of the glory of God. All have sinned. And so there is no more holy culture than any other culture. Our place of common unity is being image bearers, but it's also being broken image bearers. And when we approach the discussion of racism, first from our brokenness, from our sinfulness, I feel like it changes the entire discussion. I know it has for me. It's been convicting for me. My culture is no more holy than any other culture. I'm desperately in need of the grace of God like everybody else.
And the biblical picture is one of redeemed cultures, right? I mean, we think about Revelation and the image of the new heavens and new earth, where every tribe and every tongue and every nation, every people, they're coming together because of what Jesus did in his reconciling death for all people, regardless of race, color, creed, culture, that kind of thing. Their faith in him, their trust in him is what draws us together. That's what's so challenging, I think, about this story, is that the ones who should have exemplified that the most are the ones who are walking to the other side of the road. And that gets another issue that we're talking about when it comes to racial reconciliation or even just neighbor love in our culture right now, is that we can't just be a people who say the right things, like the priest and the Levite. They knew the law, who do religious things. They worshiped, they offered sacrifices, they helped people, they did good things. But we also have to be people who are willing to step out of our normal comfort zone and help those around us who are mistreated or discriminated against. That's the kind of incarnational ministry of Jesus, where God didn't wait around in heaven for us to get our act together.
And I think something we've talked about is that even this story implies action, right? And so a lot of, me included, kind of go into that passive stance on a lot of this, especially if it's an uncomfortable topic or an uncomfortable thing where people might get hurt. It's almost just safer to be passive.
And to pass by and to justify that
Yeah.
based on your religious experience. I mean, both the Levite and the priest here could both really justify their actions biblically, because if they had touched a dead body or come in proximity to a dead body, they were no longer able to fulfill their roles in the temple from that point. So like, you can almost hear them going back and saying, I've done something holy by avoiding this dead body. And I think we have to be careful of our faith practices cultivating the same thing. The language for us, I'll just be, is safety,
Right.
right? Well, we can't do that. We have to keep everyone safe.
And the challenge, I think, for us too, we've talked a little bit about this. Obviously, we're of the white race, and
Right.
so now we're stepping
Right.
outside of ourselves to speak into issues that we may not know that well.
Right.
In a culture that has this wonderful cancel culture vibe. So if
Yeah.
you say the wrong thing, you are in trouble immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it puts us in this bind. How do we step off the road and try to help in ways that are messy, that are going to get us in trouble with people,
Yep.
that we're going to say the wrong things and do the wrong
Right,
things,
right.
even with maybe the right intention. And so we just have to be sensitive to that we're going to mess up.
Right.
The thing I love about this Samaritan in the story, though, is that he didn't let those kind of boundaries get in the way. Whoever this man was, the story slows down there. You know, it's pretty quick up to that point. This happened,
Yeah.
they moved. But then it really slows down. Put him on his own donkey, took him to the inn. Here's how much money he gave. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Jesus' attempt to show us over and over the practical, action of love, even
Right.
across racial lines. I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. actually who made this comment about this text. He said the priest and the Levite were asking themselves the question, if I help this man, what will happen to me?
Right.
To your point.
Yeah.
The Samaritan was asking the question, if I don't help this man, what will happen to him?
Yeah.
And my goodness, right now in the church and in our culture, I think we have to start asking the question that way.
Yeah.
If we don't help people who are discriminated against or mistreated, or if we don't help them, what's going to happen to them?
Yeah.
And in a way that cuts us out of the question,
Yeah.
hopefully in a humble, sort of vulnerable, biblical way. And that's the key. That's a big challenge, I
Yeah.
think.
I think even looking at the story too, you talked a lot about mercy. Like he had mercy, but not only that, he sacrificially loved.
That's right.
And it wasn't just he moved him to a place. He
Yeah.
gave his own money. He used his own donkey. He used his own stuff, his own resources.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like, okay, now pay me back.
Yeah.
That wasn't even part of it.
Right.
And so the image that Jesus is teaching is of sacrificial love
Yeah.
to even a stranger. I think that's beautiful.
It is. And it has to be where reconciliation starts, because in
Yeah.
God's heart, that really for God, there is no love that is not self-sacrificial.
Yeah.
Those are just part of his core identity. And I always think too, when you're like working through this passage and you think about it, if you just move yourself as different people in this passage, put yourself as the Levite and be convicted, put yourself as the priest and be convicted, and then put yourself as a Samaritan. What are my actions doing that? But also, I always think for me is I need to also put myself as the beaten, bruised man laying dead in need of salvation.
Absolutely.
And praying someone will come and save me. And then that final push of go and do likewise changes so dramatically there for us.
Yeah, Jesus told the man from the very beginning before the story, do this.
Right.
And you will live. And I did an intensive Greek word study on that word do, and you know what it means?
Do it.
Do it. Do it.
Right.
And there's a lot of cost to that.
Yeah.
I read this passage this morning from Hebrews 13, and I thought it encapsulated a little bit what we're talking about too. The author says, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitalities to angels without knowing it. Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison. And this is the line that really got me. And those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. And that's the picture of love I think that we have to elevate, especially in racial conversations. Those who are mistreated, we should identify, remember, love, sacrifice for, as if we were the ones
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
And that is really, really hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's important.
Yeah, I'd say just kind of my concluding thought on that passage, it goes with that too, is just the conviction. Anytime I read this text, for me, it's the flip of, instead of me asking Jesus, who is my neighbor, it's just Jesus always returning to me and saying, who is my neighbor? Who am I looking at and showing compassion and empathy for? Because I think my response usually to Jesus is, I do a pretty good job. I think the people who live right next to me that all look like me and talk like me would say I'm a pretty good neighbor.
Right.
I don't know if those who are outside of that community would affiliate me as being their neighbor.
Right.
And that's where I become convicted.
Yeah. That's good.
So I think maybe just to wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
if there is even kind of like a bullet point, you know,
Yeah.
thing for this preaching style,
Yeah.
right? That you could kind of just highlight the things that are just really, really important right now, stepping in. And this is step one, right? This isn't the cure-all. This video is not the cure-all to, you know, learning about this
Totally.
in our church and in our family.
Yeah.
So if you could kind of maybe just have a charge of what the important things are to remember.
Yeah, I think it's active love without discrimination. I think there's a sense even in this story where the man was on his way, and as he saw this, as he learned about this, the Samaritan, he jumped in and did something about it. And I think sometimes we get too insulated, so we have to be willing to go and to be in the lives of people around us who are different than us, and we have to be willing to jump in when we see needs that we can be there for.
Thank you so much for joining us and watching this video. I'm super thankful that Brooks and Brandon took the time to really concisely speak that into our lives. I know there are a lot of takeaways that I myself am gonna think about, and I encourage you to do the same. We're gonna be continuing this series, and next time you might see some familiar faces. We wanna hear stories of people who have really experienced racism in their lives. And so I would ask that you would just come, like all of us should, with a heart of humility. Like we were talking about, we have this common sinfulness and this common brokenness, and that's how we need to approach every situation. So I'm looking forward to the next video, and I hope you guys will watch.